Let's discuss today's MPC decision. Now I'm now being joined on the news at 10 by the CEO of Financial Derivatives Company, Mr. Bismarck Rwani. Thanks a lot, Mr. Rani, for joining us on the news at 10.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
And the last time I had you in the chair, we were talking about status quo remaining the same, but it's quite a different world. Yeah. What's going on? Tell us.
8 weeks ago is like eternity. In other words, 8 weeks ago we were dealing with subsidy, and we're dealing with bad fuel, and it's a different world. 8 weeks ago there was no Ukraine had not been invaded by Russia, and the price of diesel was 350 naira per liter. Today it's completely different. 700 naira for a liter. The naira was trading at that time at about 540. Today it's trading about 590 in the parallel market. So it's a different thing. Basically what has happened is that there has been massive exogenous shocks. You have the first war, massive war in the European territory in 80 years, right? We have 3.6 million refugees and almost 10 million people going to be displaced, quarter of the population of Ukraine. Ukraine produces, it's the fifth largest producer of maize and probably about the third largest producer of wheat. Russia produces gas and all. So there has been, this is what they call a huge exogenous shock that has created an energy crisis, a commodity crisis, a financial crisis because of the sanctions, and also at the same time a refugee humanitarian crisis. The effect of it is felt all over the world, but more so for a country like Nigeria, which was ill-prepared for exogenous shocks. So we're having it, we have domestic structural issues. We also have, in addition to that, exogenous shocks, which are actually compounding a problem. As if that's not bad enough, we are in the midst of an electoral cycle.
So why would we be on status quo then, with all this new stuff happening?
Typically, central banks do not like to make moves during electoral cycles because it will be interpreted as if they're trying to favor one party or other. And this is a very peculiar situation in the sense that the central bank has to be independent, has to be apolitical, and cannot be seen to be compromised in any way, form, or manner. So that's one. Two, there's a limit to what monetary policy can go, right? And so we've got to that point where you really cannot do much. And now you're dealing with inflation. Inflation in Europe, in the United States, 7.9%, highest level in 41 years. In the UK, it's 5.5%. In the Euro area, 5.9%. Therefore, it's not just Nigeria-specific, but it gets worse here. And whether you like it or not, we did 194 billion naira worth of wheat from Russia and about 190 billion naira worth of wheat from Ukraine. Today, you can't even pay anybody in Ukraine or pay anybody in Russia because they're cut off the SWIFT system and all that. So the inventory of a normal wheat miller is about 120 days or something. So by the time we get into April, Ramadan starts on the 2nd, Easter is on the 15th and 17th, you begin to see shortages of wheat and bread. Right now, a loaf of bread is going to be going for about 1,000 naira. And so you have some real challenges ahead. Not much you can do about it, but just what you can do is palliatives, stimulus, and all of that. But again, you are going to have to be borrowing, and we are pushing a fiscal cliff. So, quite frankly, there are some very challenging days ahead. I think that's the news. So what could the central bank do? Not much. Status quo is here. But for the first time in many meetings, first of all, this is the 16th meeting which is maintained status quo out of 18 meetings. 4 people voted out of the 10. 4 voted to increase interest rates, 1 by 50 basis points and 3 by 25 basis points, which means that the hawks are coming out. But because your inflation this time is cost push, not demand pull, even if you increase interest rates, you're not going to mop up anything. The Nigerian ordinary man is stretched. So there's not much, you can't get water out of the stone. So the reality is that the only way out is to increase supply and to increase aggregate supply for that matter. And that's quite a stretch.
Is this what you say is the ordinary man test versus the reasonable man test? Talk us through that.
Well, the reality is that in economics we say the rational man. In law they say the reasonable man. The reality is that the Nigerian ordinary man is under so much pressure that is no longer, you cannot consider him a reasonable man anymore because he's under so much pressure. He's stressed. Basically, he has seen prices increase in the past 2 years by about 133%, even though the official data says 15% per annum. The reality is that when you look at that slide there, you'll find that all of a sudden you are looking at the prices, and I'll take you through the prices very soon in a second. The prices you see are, you'll find that diesel, which is one of the key issues, is up by almost, that's right. The power grid is producing 2,000 megawatts. There have been 4 force majeures in the last 2 weeks, as against 5,340. Diesel was 190 naira in 2020. It's now 700 over post 700 naira, up 294%. Petrol remains the same at 165. The bag of flour was 8,500 2 years ago. It's now it's up 181%. Sardine was 200. It's now 600. Cooking gas was 3,500. It's now 8,000. It's come down. Rice 25 down up to 30,000. Now fertilizer has gone by 220% to 16,000. The president is going to open the fertilizer plant tomorrow. Now, basically, averagely, the price of goods have gone up by 133%. This Nigerian man is under so much pressure, and therefore he can no longer be considered a rational person. Policies are made for rational and reasonable people. Therefore, you need to intervene. Because the guy is under so much pressure, he's not making rational decisions anymore. So you need 2 levels of intervention. One is psychiatric intervention to stabilize this guy who is on edge already, because he's living in a grind, basically. And financial intervention to stabilize him. And all of these things have to be done. But we are 340 days away from an election. We are the resources, and whatever you do now will be considered politically motivated. So it's between a rock and a hard place right now. And that is the key thing. So what next? This guy who is stretched is hoping for some succor. But unfortunately, the price of oil could go as high as $200 a barrel. It's 111 today, but it could drop to $60 a barrel. But no matter where the direction of oil, the Nigerian economy seems oblivious to revenue from oil because we didn't invest at the right time and all of that. So we made some wrong decisions. But what's happening is that the price of refined products is increasing. So the level of the subsidies. So basically, Nigeria raised about $1.2 billion last week from the Eurobond market. To do what? To support subsidies, right? So what does the future hold? The future this time, first and foremost, the war in Ukraine must come to an end soon. The global oil prices have to stabilize, and then we have the supply shocks, which we're having from wheat, from diesel, from all of these things, need to stabilize. But if not, there's going to be some difficult days ahead. This Easter is not going to be fun, neither will the Ramadan be fun, but again, they say it's when the going gets tough, the tough gets going.
Indeed. Thank you so much, CEO of Financial Derivatives Company, Mr. Bismarck Rewani. Thanks for doing this for us on the News.
Thank you for having me.